Hey everyone, we're at Donkey Projections. I'm Eric and we have Lucas as always.
Hey everyone.
So what we're going to be doing today is filling out best case scenario for Joe Biden for the presidential election for 2020.
With that being said, let's get right into it. With that being said, let's lay out all these safe Democratic states. As Eric has stated already, this is the best case scenario. What does that mean? That means that everything goes right for Joe Biden. Essentially, it's humanly impossible for him to, kind of do this. Basically meaning he will campaign 24/7 in all these states. Fundraising all goes his way. And that's basically what happens. Turnout comes out, and that is his best case scenario. And I am going to leave some of these safe blue states out. We'll be talking about them later because we should probably mention them later. Now we're going to go to the safe Trump states now. There's a good amount.
Yeah, so we have the middle of the country, and then we are going to make our way down south and fill out a few countries there.
You mean states?
Yep. Yeah, I mean states.
I mean, to be fair, the United States is a country.
It's a country.
It's a country full of countries.
We can say sectors of countries.
It's not a unitary system, is it? It's
Mhm.
not. All right, I think we have gotten everything. Yep. All right, now we're going to head back to some of the safe D states that we didn't put. These states include Colorado and New Mexico. These two states have been swinging more and more to the left recently. New Mexico getting a lot of Hispanic votes. Yes, Colorado will also be swinging more to the left. So these two, best case scenario, will go to Joe Biden in a safe margin, at least 15 points. I'm not actually going to put Nevada as safe. I'll come back to that later. But Minnesota, given the state of the country right now and the George Floyd protests, I do think Joe Biden can carry the state in a safe margin in his best case scenario. Regularly, I think this would either be lean or likely, but again, best case scenario, this will go to Joe Biden in a safe margin. Let's see, what else do we have here?
We have New Hampshire.
Yes, polling does show Biden up in a lean margin, but New Hampshire hasn't went to a Republican since George W. Bush. This area has been pretty Democratic, and I don't think that it will really go to Donald Trump in this election. And I think that is all. Oh, Virginia. Virginia, usually it's likely, again, if this is the best case scenario, it will be swinging to a safe margin. Especially considering Virginia has been moving more and more and more to the left. That's why I do think this will be in a safe margin. Let's now head to the safe Republican states that we didn't mention. I actually think we got all of them. Yeah, we did get all of them. Alrighty.
Yeah, we can move on to lean in. Anything that's not safe, really.
Let's head to lean and likely now. How about Eric? You discuss the three states in the blue wall.
All right. So for let's start with Pennsylvania. I think this will probably be, if Joe Biden does his best here, this will probably be a likely. Surprisingly. Because Pennsylvania is a fairly Democratic state. We got the cities from the west, and that have lots of Democratic populations, and the demographic supports the Democratic Party, and especially right now, protests of George Floyd and I forgot his first name, but the Brooks man in Georgia who was killed by police. Maybe that sparked some more outrage. Rayshard Brooks, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, if Joe Biden puts his focus here, because he knows Donald Trump did take the state in 2016, he could be able to take it in a very comfortable margin if he really just goes all out.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, no, I just wanted to move on. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to add something to Pennsylvania. It can be considered a fairly Democratic state, some of the parts of it, but we do need to remember that this was a state that was carried by Donald Trump in 2016, and as well as Western Pennsylvania being pretty Republican because of the rural areas. Fairly Democratic, sure. If we're talking about the certain parts, but I don't think the state as a whole is a fairly Democratic state. I think it's more, kind of like that toss-up type of state.
Hmm.
Likely Democratic. Honestly, I don't know what else to put it. I would put this one as lean. That is definitely possible. But even likely, I feel like Bennet is too generous to the Democrats, even in the best case scenario. But lean, I'm thinking somewhere in between lean and likely. Let's just go with likely. I think likely is fine. Because, again, putting all his resources here, he was born in Scranton. I think it is likely. All right, Eric, you want to head on to the next state?
Yep. So next, we have Michigan, and I think this would also fall under a likely if he really, really, really does his best.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting to say, before this was a tilt Democratic, but because of the events, same thing that applied from Pennsylvania can be applied here. Michigan does have a Democratic governor, Gretchen Whitmer. The Senate does favor the Democratic Party, so Joe Biden does have a chance here, and if he learns from Hillary Clinton's mistakes of not really campaigning on the blue wall because she just hoped that it would go to her despite the campaigning, Joe Biden could really carry the state if he really tries his best. Now we can move on to Wisconsin, which is almost the same deal as with Michigan, but this would go in a lean margin. Wisconsin is the state, as I said earlier, that Trump is most likely to take. So giving it a likely would be a bit too generous. Although we do see protests here in Milwaukee. Yeah, we can move on to Wisconsin. But instead of giving it a likely, we have to be realistic here just a little bit. Wisconsin would be under a lean category. Again, first of all, Donald Trump did take this state in 2016. And second of all, it's the state that's most likely to go to him again in 2020 out of all of these states in the blue wall.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't give it a likely, but best case scenario, if Joe Biden campaigns in this area just like he would in Michigan, he could get it to a lean. We have seen protests against police brutality in Milwaukee, a big city there, and it's right next to it's right next to the epicenter of where all the outrage started, which is in Minnesota. So it would make sense to put it as so. And lastly, we move on to Minnesota, which in best case would be a safe state, especially after these protests.
Right. Yeah, I think Wisconsin does have a lot of those more rural areas, which you'll usually vote for the Republican. Michigan is interesting, actually. Let's talk elections, but this one is likely on the regular projections. I personally do think that is a little bit too generous, looking at the polling data and all the information, especially considering this was a state that Donald Trump won in 2016. But yes, Michigan, we have a lot of those African-American voters in cities like Detroit. And all those urban towns do contribute to a Democratic victory if Joe Biden completely goes at full force in Michigan to get those voters out and campaigning super hard. I do think at that point it is likely, but that is, again, pretty unlikely, very unlikely, actually. All right, we're going to now head to the states of Iowa and Ohio. Previously, we have given these states to the the Republicans in like a pretty solid margin. I think we put both of them as lean before.
I think likely, actually.
Likely, really? Okay, likely, I guess then. First, let's talk about Ohio. Ohio is a state that has been swinging more and more to the right recently. Interestingly enough, Joe Biden is leading the polls in the state of Ohio by, it was quite an okay margin. It was like, what, 1 point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 1 point.
Yeah. Again, Ohio, I feel like will go to the Republicans at the end of the day. Best case scenario, when he continues to campaign and all the voters come out, I think it narrows down to a toss-up. I think it's a pure toss-up. I mean, that's a huge jump from likely to toss-up, but we do have to remember the events that have taken place recently. Quite frankly, I think this state is between likely and tilt Republican. Because, you know what, I think I'm going to leave this one as toss-up. It's a state that's swinging more to the right. but it did go to Barack Obama, and both times he ran, and Joe Biden was on the ticket. So maybe that name recognition and, people knowing that they elected Obama before, maybe that changes something. I'm not completely sure. It will really, impact the election. I think I'm going to leave this one as a toss-up here. Iowa, again, we have more of these rural towns. Iowa's a tricky one, too. I think in our first projection, we actually put Iowa as a solid Republican. That might have been a little bit too generous to the Republicans, but Iowa just seems like it probably will go to the Republicans in an election cycle. But if we're talking about best case scenario and Joe Biden is campaigning very hard, I think Iowa will be like Ohio. It will be between tilt and toss-up, but I do think Iowa is a little bit more leaning towards tilt R than Ohio is. But at the end of the day, I do think Iowa still remains a toss-up in the best case scenario. Yeah, I think that's what happens here. But again, even with the toss-up, it could go to the Democrats as well. I'm thinking about this too. Maybe they could go to tilt D if this is best case scenario. Again, this is really hard to tell. But I think I'm going to leave this one as toss-up. I don't know what else to say. I think toss-up is the best characterization here. We already have Joe Biden at over 270 now. I didn't notice that before, but wow. All he needs to do is carry Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, flip those three, and I guess he wins the presidency. All right, Eric, you want to head now to Arizona?
Yeah, so Joe Biden, according to the polls, which have pretty consistent results, he's doing a pretty good job there. Arizona has that Hispanic population, which is in support of the BLM movement. I know we keep repeating this movement, but in this day and age, it has a really significant impact. So what we put it as before is tilt. We put it as tilt before. It's Arizona is actually becoming a battleground state. Best case scenario, I think he can take this in a lean margin. If Joe Biden really has some sort of superhuman ability to campaign everywhere in the matter of time he has, he could really, he can carry this in a pretty comfortable margin.
Yeah, I agree. I think lean is definitely the right characterization here. If a lot of the Hispanics go out and vote in this best case scenario, he will be able to get a lot of those votes out. I want to quickly touch back to Ohio and Iowa. I think likely Republican is a little bit too generous to the Republicans at this point. I think in our regular predictions, we are going to move this one now to lead Republican because things have tightened up a bit, especially in Ohio where we have polling with Joe Biden up. Maybe Ohio does go to tilt D. I don't know. I feel like Ohio is really hard to tell here, but this is going to be really interesting. These two states, in best case scenario, it's kind of hard to tell. Anyway, to the state of Texas now. Texas, some people are going to say that this should go to the Democrats. I disagree with that. This is Texas. We have a high Hispanic population here, but other parts of the state, we have solid Republican counties. With that being said, I think that it will go to Donald Trump, and it's going to be in between a tilt and a tilt and a lean. But again, I'm not completely sure about that. This one's hard to tell. I think I'm leaning more towards lean for this one. I think I would put that as that. Although debatably it could be tilt again, but this one's again pretty debatable. Eric, what do you think about Texas?
Texas is a very mixed bag in my opinion. Hardcore Republicans would say, "Oh, no way, Texas is staying Republican in this election," and I keep saying that. Yes, Texas is swinging more and more to the left, but it's probably going to go purple in 2024 and not in this election.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then we have the hardcore Democrats who think that, Texas might turn purple, if not tilt blue, depending on events in 2024. I honestly think that Donald Trump there is a very, very, very small chance that Texas will go to the Democrats if all of the protests eventually die down. Best case scenario, I think lean likely is as generous to the Democrats as it can get.
Really, I think lean likely was actually our regular prediction. I think in a best case scenario it goes to tilt like lean, but
Oh
um,
yeah, that's what I meant. Tilt
uh,
lean, not lean
all right.
likely. Whoops.
Anyway, let's now head to the South. This one's actually interesting here. We have the states of Alabama and Mississippi. Again, these have really high African American populations, but we have a lot of Republicans here as well. Will Joe Biden have a chance of carrying it? No, but I do think the margins will tighten up a little bit. It'll be a likely state. Now, the state of Georgia, this is actually very interesting. I just saw a new projection that came out yesterday. One source actually gives this state to Joe Biden, which was, I think, pretty interesting. I don't think that's really going to happen. At the end of the day, I do think Trump will carry the state. In a best case scenario, Joe Biden, I do not think will carry it, but I do think, Joe Biden will not carry it like safely. I think that the state will be a toss-up. It can go either way, but I don't think it can be solidly for Joe Biden
Hmm.
with the blue. And I'm going to head down south to Florida. Actually, no. I'll go to North Carolina. Eric can jump to Florida after. North
Yep.
Carolina got a lot of African Americans here. And North Carolina did flip in 2008 for did flip in 2008 for Barack Obama, but it did flip back to Mitt Romney in 2012. But North Carolina has this African American population that might go out and vote, especially as a result of these Black Lives Matter protests. So, in my opinion, if this is best case scenario and everything goes right for Joe Biden, I think he will carry the state. It's debatable whether it's between a tilt and lean. Eric, what do you think? Tilt or lean on this one?
Lean would be too generous to the Democrats, I
Interesting.
think. I think tilt is as good as it could.
Okay. Yeah, in my opinion, it's dead in the middle between tilt and lean, somewhere there. But this state will go to Joe Biden in a best case scenario if he's able to fundraise so much and get that voters out. In my opinion, it will go to Joe Biden. Eric, how about you head to Florida now?
Yeah, so we can move on to Florida now. And I think this can go somewhere in between a tilt and a lean margin and nothing more. Um, as we said with Arizona, Florida does have a highly Hispanic population. And in general, Florida is a very distinct swing state. So before, we were putting it as toss up until Republican and nothing more. If Joe Biden really tries hard here, but again, he can't really go everywhere in this country in the matter of time he has, and especially with this lockdown in place. I think the best he can do is probably somewhere in between a tilt and a lean.
I would agree with that. What would you think?
Hmm. I think tilt is more realistic, but um,
If we're talking best case, I do think lean might make sense here.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
And I think we have 4 more left. All right. I'll do Nebraska second. I do think Joe Biden will carry the state of, the district of Nebraska second. This district does have a lot of those cities because we can see that it's pretty small, which shows that there are a lot of cities there. We know that Omaha's here, which is Nebraska's biggest city. In 2008, Barack Obama did carry this district. He put a lot of fundraising, a lot of ads out there. He did carry the district. If that happens again and Joe Biden pours in money, he will carry Nebraska in a tilt. Did I put tilt? No, I didn't.
That's
Okay, yeah.
tilt.
It will put it in a tilt. So I think that definitely makes sense here.
Should we move on to Nevada?
Sure, Nevada. I'll give a brief synopsis really quickly. Eric can take it over after. Basically,
Yep.
Nevada polling is a little bit tighter here. I think it was a lean Democratic for the polling, so that's interesting to think about. Eric, why don't you cover that?
Yeah, so even as a best case scenario, I don't think Biden can take this in a safe margin. Likely at most. Nevada again is a fairly Democratic state, but I remember we made this connection before. The mayor of New York City is essentially the governor. I remember Lucas making that statement, and the same thing applies to Nevada. Yes, there's Reno out there, but what?
No, it's funny. Just keep going.
Okay. So, yes, there's Reno out there, but Vegas is the gambling capital, and they have a apparently independent mayor. But I've seen her get onto CNN, and the reporters there, who are mostly Democrats, were very shocked with what she had to say, which kind of implies that in probably in terms of reopening, she's kind of more of a conservative. So, and probably her voters are in support of that too. They want to gamble and go to the casinos. So that's probably, implying that, they're more conservative. So again, likely is, I think, even in best case, the right one and not safe.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's likely. Yeah, upstate New York is irrelevant. Don't listen to anyone who tells you otherwise. Anyways, except for Buffalo. Anyways, now let's get to Maine now. Maine's second is a pretty Republican district. This district was carried by Donald Trump in 2016, but that was actually the first time that Maine split its electoral votes. But obviously, looking at Maine, I'm actually going to zoom in now so kind of further understand this. We see a huge amount of space for one congressional district and a much smaller amount of space for the other. This shows that there's a lot more population in this one area. I mean that this area and this area are basically equivalent in population, which means that these places, this bottom congressional district is more densely populated than this bigger one here. Now, what inference can you draw from that? You can draw that this bigger congressional district must be more rural than this one. This one must have more of the biggest cities, because if they're equivalent, they're essentially showing that the size, the population density is a lot more in the bottom one. I just messed that up, but hold on. Okay, and the same can be said about Nebraska. I'm going off on a little tangent right now, but a tiny space here. We can guess that this is probably a big city. We have Omaha here, and this big space here shows that it's a rural area. Cool.
Omaha steaks.
Yeah, I love Omaha steaks. Anyways, so first district will go into safe. Second district, I do think Donald Trump will still carry it because of how rural it is. Yeah, I think even if he launches all those ads, I still think it will go in a tilt margin. I'm going to put that in tilt for Donald Trump. Now, Maine all-state, we got to take into account the two districts. This barely went to Hillary Clinton in 2016. It was in a lean margin because we got to factor in both sections. I do think it will go into likely, not in a safe. Actually, I think in a safe, yes, this is best case scenario. It will go into safe to Joe Biden. In a normal projection, this will probably be either lean or likely, but best case scenario, it will be a solid. And that's it for this video today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you liked this video, please hit the like button. And if you like our content, please subscribe. We'll see you in our next video tomorrow, which is where we discuss the Donald Trump best case scenario.
One more thing, make sure to join our Discord server and join our Patreon.
Yep.
See ya.